Hello there and welcome. On this week's edition, we shall be speaking with the Minister of Communication Technology, Mrs. Omobola Johnson. Now, it's been 1 year that she took the mantle of leadership at the ministry, which was created by the present administration of Dr. Goodluck Jonathan in July 2011. Now, our guest appointment may not have come as a surprise for experts in the ICT sector because she came from a core IT background, having graduated with a bachelor degree in electrical and electronic engineering from the University of Manchester and a master's degree in digital electronics from King's College in London. But before her appointment, she was the country director of Accenture Nigeria. So we sought to find out what steps have been taken by her ministry in the past 1 year to ensure that Nigeria joins the list of developed nations that has embraced ICT to develop other sectors of the economy. She also lets us in on the challenges militating against quality delivery of telecoms operators in the country and how that is also being tackled, knowing that some 10 years ago, a number of subscribers was about 400, but now it has grown to over 90 million lines. Interesting, you might say. Well, it promises to be an exciting interview, so stay with us while we move along. I'm your host, Ayotunde Balogun, and this is Question Time. Mr. Omobola Johnson, you're welcome to Question Time.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Now, first of all, let me congratulate you on your appointment as the Minister for Communication and Technology, and that's a very sensitive ministry, if I must say. But starting off, how would you rate the communication development sector in Nigeria before coming in as Minister and now?
I think when you talk about telecoms, we've done tremendously well in Nigeria. Obviously, you've heard the story from 400,000 lines, 10, 11 years ago, to the over 90 million subscribers that we have today. So this industry has done very, very well, and that has really been as a result of government policy and the liberalization of the telecoms industry. The Communication Technology Ministry also has the IT industry. We also superintend the IT industry as well, and that industry has done fairly well, not as well as telecoms, obviously, when you look at what we've done in the telecoms industry. And that is one area that we will be focusing on quite extensively in the next 3 or 4 years in this ministry.
Now, you talk about communications and information, if I may put it that way. Is there some kind of relation, or are they separate?
Absolutely not. They're actually very closely related. In fact, when you talk to people in the industry,
sorry to cut you, because when you talk about communication technology ministry, somebody say, "Oh, it's not information communication technology."
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
So there's this kind of a misconception about that.
Yeah, absolutely right. It is really and truly, it's the ICT ministry, Information and Communication Technology. But I guess we had to be careful that it wasn't confused with the Ministry of Information, out of which this ministry was actually taken out of. So that's why we called it Communication Technology. But really and truly, we cover both the IT industry and the telecoms industry. And really, it's very difficult to separate the two industries now. When you hear people talk about the convergence of the industry, you really can't separate IT or telecoms. When you look at the smartphones of today, are they computers or are they phones, or are they televisions because you can watch TV? When you look at a laptop, is it a phone because you can Skype on it? Is it a television because you can watch films, or is it a computer because you can use it to do all your computing things as well? So really, the industry has converged. So you can't really separate IT from communication technology, which is why this ministry is actually looking at both those industries together.
Now, it is a very big ball or big basket, if I may put it that way, but how do you merge all these into one? I mean, day in, day out, when you have to face issues and confronting this rather huge industry. What's the daily schedule like? I mean, from both within and outside?
Yeah, it is a big industry, and I think more than the size of the industry, it is one of the fastest growing sectors of this economy, growing at over 30% year on year. So yes, that makes it quite big, quite strategic, and also quite important. In terms of the daily schedule, I think that there are a number of things that go on within the ministry. First of all, there's a regulation of the industry. Of course, you've heard about NCC that regulates the IT industry. the telecoms industry. Then, of course, there's NITDA that regulates the IT industry. So that's one aspect of the industry, of the ministry. There's another aspect which is really about developing the industry itself, really one thing I've talked about a lot over the last 6 months or so, I would say, is the increasing the domestic participation in the ICT industry. So we have a lot of telecoms companies, we've got a lot of IT companies, but we see that when you look at the participation of Nigerians and Nigerian companies in that industry, it really isn't where it needs to be. And when you look at the growth of the industry, we should be participating more in this. So one of the other big things we're looking at is what I call local content participation in the industry, both in terms of services, in terms of assembly, in terms of software development, really across the whole sector of the industry. So that's another part we're looking at. And of course, really the policy, which is the policy that's going to drive everything that we're doing, and that's one area that the ministry, and that's really the biggest responsibility of the ministry, the policy development and policy administration. We are just about concluding the national ICT policy. For the first time in Nigeria, we'll have a combined information communication technology policy, and that work is almost done. I think that we'll be going to it should be released in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And that really will be the overarching, the overarching framework for how the industry is going to be managed and run going forward.
We're talking about the Vision 2020, so that must be a very big challenge for a ministry.
It is. Well, I don't think it's a challenge. I think it's an opportunity, and I'll give you some examples. I've been over the last 6 months or so, been visiting different factories and looking at what they're doing. These things are not that high tech, for instance. So we're not manufacturing PCs, and really and truly nobody does. There's, one company will manufacture, like Intel, for instance, will manufacture the processor chip. Somebody else manufactures the casing. Somebody else does the screen. So it's all manufactured by different companies, and then somebody puts it all together. And so what we're looking at really in Nigeria today is assembly of these devices. And it's not rocket science. Yes, it's true we have all the issues of power and all of that, but it's not really only the ICT industry that has those issues. And these issues are being resolved as we speak anyway. It's anybody that wants to manufacture in this industry today. So that is very possible. We can have companies that are assembling computers for this market, hopefully cheaper and at the same quality than the ones that are imported. When we talk about cards, these chip cards, I'll give you an example. The way we're going as a country right now, we've got national ID cards are going to come up soon. We've got all these cash like Lagos and the cashless economy that the CBN is really driving and pushing, which requires these chip cards. We've got all these ATMs and everything. So I've done a quick calculation, and I always say this: in the next 3 or 4 years, we'll have about 500 million, 500 million of these chip cards in circulation in Nigeria. Now, wouldn't it be a shame if the same thing that happened with mobile phones, where not one of these cards is made in Nigeria, just imported? That would be such a shame. And there are companies in Nigeria today that are actually producing some of those chip cards for the banks. And we're saying that if they invest in those companies, expand their capabilities to be able to meet the demand that we see, then we wouldn't have missed out on that, and all those cards will be manufactured in Nigeria. So there are many examples like that. So I don't see, yes, it's not going to be easy. We need the infrastructure, we need the investments. These are not small investments, but the market is there. And what I've found on this desk in the last 1 year is that the interest is also there. We've got companies coming from all over the world wanting to partner with Nigerian companies. We've got Nigerian companies who are ready to make that investment because of the size of the market and because of the way that market is growing very, very quickly.
Now, of course, earlier on you talked about the impact that it's had on our youth, talking about these communication technologies, but some will argue again, will it have some kind of a negative effect in the long run? Yes, we do need to embrace some of these technologies, but let's narrow it down to our moral values, as a people, with the internet and the social media and all whatnot. What's your take on that?
I can understand that when people say, you're giving, you're taking broadband or internet to schools, all they're going to do is get on Facebook and Yahoo and all this kind of stuff. And exactly. I mean, there's that side of it, which I think is the negative side. But I think, the positives far outweigh the negative side. Imagine giving internet to a child in a rural area. Imagine the opportunities. Just you've been on the internet. You can see the scope of what is possible from an educational perspective, from an exposure perspective, That's what I look at in that. Yes, it's true that, children don't read anymore because it's easier to go on the internet, but that's just the way the world is, We can't teach, our children can't be taught or can't learn the way that we were taught by rote, and we did exams and everything. It's very different now. The world needs different skills. The world needs different kind of thinking, And so the way that we can get our own youth to think and to be educated in that way is first to use technology more and more. So yes, I do understand the negative sides of it, but I think that the positives really far outweigh the negative sides.
Now, of course, you are the minister, and you have an ICT-based background, coming from the private sector, if I must say, into the public sector. But in comparison, what would you say has really changed, if you like, or what is similar? What things do you think that you can bring on board to stem the tide, as it is?
I think really it was a bit of a culture shock, coming from the private sector into government, because really the cultures are really very, very different. And I think that I'm beginning to understand the culture of government and public service a lot better, having actually been in it. The similarities for me as an individual is that I think that whether it's private sector or public sector, there are two things for me that are very important, and that's accountability, and that's also results. And so whether, I was the MD of Accenture and now I'm the Minister of Communication Technology, those two things for me are the things that drive me. I've got to be accountable for what I'm doing here, and I've got to deliver results at the end of the day. So those two things haven't changed. The one thing that I think maybe frustrates is really the speed at which things are done. Private sector,
public sector
and private sector. You can move very quickly in the private sector. Yes, it's smaller, it's less bureaucratic. You can't move at that pace in the public service because really.
Why do you think that is the case?
Well, I think that there are many. If I look at, there are many things that cause that. I think first of all, the size of what you're doing and the impact of what you're doing, if you get it wrong, can be quite significant. And so therefore it makes sense to think and to be very deliberate in what you do. But having said that, there are many inefficiencies in the civil service, and there is a tremendous amount of bureaucracy that coming in as I was a process consultant for many years, coming in as a process consultant, I can see where all the bottlenecks are. So there is some bureaucracy that I think you can get rid of. But there really is some of that bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is always used in a negative way. There's some of that good bureaucracy that I see that is important. So, for instance, having, almost having an audit trail of every single thing that you do up until the point that the decision is made. For posterity, so if somebody asks, why did you do that, you can actually trace back and say, okay, this is what was, these are the records and this is what was done. So I understand the positive bureaucracy part of it. But for me, that is probably the biggest frustration, how long it just takes to get things moving. But I don't want to get used to it. Because I think if I get used to it, then you kind of work at the pace of the slowest person.
It's the Nigerian factor.
Absolutely. So I'm still driving and still trying to keep on that private sector mentality, even though I'm working very much in the public sector and in public service now.
Now, in your meetings, with other ministers, at the Federal Executive Council meeting, I'm sure deliberations are made on how some of these things can be effectively tackled. What would you say to that? I mean, what ideas do you think can be brought to the fore in terms of some of these bottlenecks that you talk about?
Yeah.
And perhaps if it's going to be taken at the highest level as an idea, okay, let's try this out. Let's do away with this. Let's adopt this, and coming from the private sector.
I think the biggest thing probably, or the biggest difference with President Jonathan's administration is that there are very clear targets as to what needs to be done. And each of us ministers has actually signed a scorecard with the president saying that this is what my ministry is going to deliver over the next, by 2015. And so we've all done that. We've all signed off on those scorecards. And that in itself is a great motivator. Because if you signed off on this and you said that I would do this, Mr. President, you've employed me to do this particular job as a minister, and this is what I'm going to deliver to you, and this is how it keys into your transformation agenda. That is the biggest motivation for ensuring that these things are done with speed, on time, on budget, and all of that. And I think that's maybe one big difference. I don't think that there's been any other administration where ministers have been asked to sign performance scorecards, so to speak. And for me, that's one big difference that will motivate each and every one of us cabinet members to deliver on results, when this administration is over.
So in other words, would you say that your appointment as the minister has been timely and trying to solve some of these? Because obviously, it's a very big industry, and and like you rightly pointed out, some of these bottlenecks can be very, very frustrating in using your words. But are you really geared up for this?
I think that the timing of the ministry is perfect. It's really good. Because we are like I said, we had this telecoms revolution. IT was kind of trailing behind, but we're moving into an era of the broadband revolution where data is king as opposed to voice. And so having a ministry that is really going to strategize and guide and direct on how we're going to have this broadband or ubiquitous internet infrastructure is really very, very timely. My appointment, I think it was just fortuitous that I happened to be the pioneer minister. I think it's a great honor, it's a great privilege, but it's also quite scary because really, this is where the foundation is laid for what will happen going forward. And if there isn't a good foundation, clearly, subsequent ministers will really have to. It will be more difficult for them going forward. So, the scary bit for me is ensuring that in the next, 4 years, if I'm so lucky to be here for 4 years, we lay that foundation for Nigeria to be a diversified economy, for Nigeria to be a knowledge society, for Nigeria to take advantage of what technology can do for countries. And I think that's really what keeps me going, to ensure that we have that solid foundation for the development of Nigeria into a knowledge society.
Now, throughout your travels, within the country, visited states, you've seen what obtains in some of these states. Talking about the advancement in their technology pursuits. Now, will you really say Nigeria is prepared to attain that level in the shortest possible time? Or do we have to make sacrifices to wait a little bit longer?
I don't think we should wait. I think we're ready. And I always use, telecoms as an example. I think, and even things like ATMs. Everybody always says, I remember in Accenture, we actually worked with the banks to set up, we did feasibility studies on the success of ATMs. And people always said, Nigerians don't use ATMs. They like to go inside banks, all the numbers, everything. But every time people say that, the take-up has been just tremendous. And we said that with mobile phones. The take-up has been tremendous. And so I think that we are ready as a country. I think the only thing that's holding us back is the infrastructure that we need to make this thing more ubiquitous all across the country. And it also is the applications, because anything that is ICT driven is driven by software. So it's having an application that will enable us to have applications on our mobile phones that are relevant to Nigeria. And I see so many, I've been to a number of places where I see bright, young, innovative people developing tremendously useful software.
In our schools?
In schools, in universities, in some of these innovation hubs that are all over the country right now. There are a number of those. And I think all they need really is that catalyst. Sometimes it's funding, and for that reason we're setting up some venture capital funds, particularly for the ICT industry, and also grants to support these people as they begin to develop their software before they become commercial. Sometimes it's funding, sometimes it's just improving the quality of the software, because nobody wants software that it's not documented, you can't debug it, you can't maintain it. So there are many things that we see that are inhibiting this explosion in the IT industry, and we're actually working on those to remove those inhibitors and ensure that we get that critical mass of software developers and software entrepreneurs that will actually then drive the explosion in the IT industry.
So in other words, you say we have the capabilities of
absolutely
really developing
absolutely that yeah. Nigerians are winning prizes all over the world. Software competitions. You just get this young Nigerian who's actually won this prize in a competition that has people from literally all over the world. So yes, definitely we're ready.
Now let's take it back. Let me take it back to the private sector. Now, as the MD of Accenture, obviously there must have been some attempts by the organization, perhaps in the past, to make some recommendations to the government, at the highest level, on how to go about some of these challenges, if you might put it that way, that would benefit the industry. Do you really think that's still happening right now?
I think it's still happening. I mean, it's funny you should mention that. I was privileged. My very last job or client, just before I left Accenture, was actually the National Planning Commission, where Accenture was engaged to work with the National Planning Commission to develop Vision 2020. So we're very much involved in that process of developing this national economic transformation plan. And, that was a great eye-opener for us in Accenture. And I always said to people that it was, for me, it just opened up how the vast opportunities in this country, and the fact that we're just scratching the surface, quite honestly, where we are today. And I don't think that has changed, but I think what has changed actually is the fact that we are recognizing those opportunities. And I'll use the Communication Technology Ministry as an example, where this is the first time a ministry has been set up to look at this particular sector. This is a sector that is so important. Go anywhere in the world today. We're probably one of the last countries in the world to set up a Ministry of Communication Technology. Not too late,
yes,
because we can. Quite surprising, because you look all over, even in Africa, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, they all had their ministries very much focused on ICT. Yes, it's true, we didn't have a ministry, but there were science and tech who were looking at things. So it was kind of covered, but not with the kind of focus that it has, that it has today. So I would say that, and that came out of advice that the private sector was given to government. There was a presidential committee set up, made up of private sector and public sector, on ICTs, and one of their key recommendations was to set up this ministry. So, that advice is still going on. It's still been taken, and this ministry is
all been brought on board.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Now let's even look at the agencies now under your ministry. How proactive are they? Because definitely you'll need them to really carry out some of these policies.
Yeah. So there are five agencies under this ministry. There's the NCC, Nigeria Communications Commission. There's which is a regulator of the telecoms industry. There's the National IT Development Agency, NITDA, which basically looks after the development of the IT industry and also regulation to a certain extent. There is NIPOST, which everybody forgets about. That's the post office, which is actually, for me, they're a rough diamond. There's so much that we can do, and we are doing with NIPOST. And of course, we've got the two PLCs. There's Nightcomsat, which is a satellite company, and Galaxy Backbone that looks after the infrastructure, ICT infrastructure for federal government.
Let me now take you to NIPOST, because I really got excited when you talked about NIPOST. For so many people, is as good as dead. I mean, because ever since we've had this explosion of these social media
Absolutely.
and whatnot, they seem to have been relegated to the background.
Yeah.
So what's the ministry doing to revive the fortunes of NIPOST? Because before the social media came in, it was all about NIPOST.
Absolutely. So, people were posting letters. I remember being in school and you would get a letter posted to you, but now it's all emails and texts and all of that. Yeah, so it is true that in terms of the core function, which was Postal, that is obviously declining all over the world, not just in Nigeria. But why I say that NIPOST is a rough diamond, a hidden gem, is really when you look at NIPOST's infrastructure. We have 3,000 post offices and postal agencies all over the country. 3,000. I'm telling you.
Enough?
It's not enough, but it's more than any other. It's the biggest retail infrastructure we have in this country, bigger than the biggest bank, right? And they're in local government areas, some of the rural areas. And so what we're looking at is this asset that we have. We can use it for many things. So one of the areas we're looking at is financial inclusion. The post office is a friendly place. People go there, they post letters, whatever it is. But what we're looking at is using this infrastructure to extend retail banking services to the rural areas. And we're working with the CBN to implement that financial inclusion agenda. There's also digital inclusion, where a post office can have, for instance, internet connection, a couple of PCs, people come in there, they do their email to their children abroad or whatever it is, they get online, they fill in forms, and we'll hopefully talk about government services that are coming online. So the post offices, because of the infrastructure they have, they're a tremendous avenue for financial inclusion and digital inclusion. And then, of course, very importantly, e-commerce Because when you buy goods off the internet, they've got to be delivered. We always forget that. And really, so even if the letter volumes are declining, if we are able to implement a successful e-commerce strategy, goods have to be delivered. And you don't always have to use a courier company. The post office, and really, the post office is the only institution that knows everybody's name and address. Literally, they post letters physically to your home. And so that advantage, we can leverage on that.
All right, Minister, we'll have to take a break, and when we come back, we shall continue with our discussion, taking a look at the Information Communication Technology Ministry, or the Communication Technology Ministry. And our guest, Mrs. Omobola Johnson, is still here with us to talk more on the issues affecting the industry and probably propose some solutions on what needs to be done to achieve a better sector. Talking about communication technology. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Art is a story. On Art House, we start from the beginning.
The mixture of colors and the brushstrokes. The chiseled wonders that link art and science. The steps in each performance. The highs and the lows of emotion. The world of words, rhymes and rhythms.
But this is not a political poem. It's a revolution. It's the evolution of a people refusing to suffer and smile the wall.
On every page, all the elements of a good read. Where else can you get it? Art House. Life is art.
Welcome back. It's still question time on Channels Television. Our guest, Mrs. Omobola Johnson, is still here to talk more on the ministry, that's communication technology, and quite a lot has been said. Before we went on the break, you were talking about the need to ensure that we encourage people to start keeping commemorative stamps, the philately thing, and it's quite interesting because I certainly, for one, have been looking for an opportunity to do that, but I haven't. But hopefully, I guess I will be able to do that very soon. But let's even move away from there. Let's look at this Nigeria Sat project now. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that is one area that will interest you. So far, how have we been able to cope with that? What plans have been done on that?
This is the satellite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think last year in 2011, we launched 3 satellites. 1 communication technology satellite, and I think 2 or 3 observatory satellites for imagery. Very important in the development of any economy. I think for the satellite and the imagery, in terms of what you can do with those. So, for instance, I was just actually speaking with the Minister of Agriculture, where they can use some of the satellite imagery to improve the productivity of crops, because you can use that satellite imagery to look at the soil and what kind of soil it is and everything, and even beginning to look at arable land that's available. Just having one satellite up in up in space that is actually taking pictures of the different countries. And for instance, the last floods in Ibadan, it was satellite imagery that they were able to take and see where the flooding was worse and all of that. So very important in terms of development. But then again, you look at the communication satellite, Nigerian 1R, that was launched in December. Again, very, very important in terms of many things to supplement or complement the fiber that's been rolled out and the base station and wireless broadband and all of that. That is technology that is immune to the terrain of the country. So basically you can, it's very, very fast to deploy bandwidth regardless of the terrain. So we have only 1 satellite now. Of course, there are many private sector organizations that have the satellites, but it's a very important and very strategic to ICT in any country, having satellites that are focused on whose footprint is focused on the country.
Are there plans to have any more satellite projects in the future?
There are. It's a very expensive business. Clearly, it costs several hundreds of millions to launch a satellite. So we've got 1 now, and really for it to be effective, you need a constellation of satellites. So there are plans to launch additional satellites for the country, which hopefully will be done in the next couple of years.
And will we be able to launch satellites right here in Nigeria?
Well, There is actually a long-term space policy, and the intent. So even as we build these satellites, what is happening is that Nigerian engineers have been working alongside the Chinese engineers to design and to build those and to launch those satellites. The space policy that is being driven by the Science and Tech Ministry says that in 25 years we should be launching our own satellites, and maybe shortly after that we'll have a Nigerian man on the moon.
Is a long way off.
Well, it was 25 years in 2007 or 8. It is a long way off because this is, very advanced technology. This is very, it's not cheap. It's very complex technology. And so what we're doing is that we're working alongside, it was Chinese and also the UK firm that helped us launch the observatory satellites, developing our own capacity and competence in satellite technology and launching satellites.
Okay, let me take you back again to one of your agencies. The National Communications Commission, the NCC. Now, over time, they've been waging some kind of a war, if I may put it that way, a battle, with service providers. And I just want to find out from you, what do you think can be done to really ensure that some of these service providers give Nigerians the best in terms of the way they do their services and all whatnot, so we don't have these issues just keep popping up over and over again.
Yeah, it is a big issue, quality of service, and it's something that the NCC has been very focused on trying to resolve. So what happened a few months back was that the NCC had defined quality of service indicators, so drop call rates, how quickly you can initiate a call, and all of that. So those indicators were agreed with the operators. And it was found that, as a subscriber, those indicators were not being met. And so the NCC implemented the fines, basically the consequences of not meeting quality of service indicators. And so there was a bit of a tussle because really, as you heard right now, the network operators say, it is not in our interest to give poor quality of service. And, they then give the reasons why quality of service is so poor. It's power, they will tell you that they're actually running, some of those operators are running over 10,000 generators because every single base station is going to be powered by a generator. There are issues around the right of way. The procurement of the right of way is very expensive, all of that. And then you erect a mast and, you've got environmental issues to worry about. So a lot of the quality of service issues that we're faced with is really because we don't have enough infrastructure. It's a case of demand and supply. So the number of subscribers has grown, and our ability to roll out that infrastructure quickly has also grown very fast. So there are two things that we're doing right now. There's one area which the ministry is pursuing, and that is basically removing all the bottlenecks for infrastructure. So for instance, now we've collaborated with the Ministry of Works, and we're trying to make it much easier for a network operator or infrastructure providers to acquire the right of way and to lay their fiber optic cable faster and cheaper. We're working with the Ministry of Environment to ensure that the time that it takes to do the environmental impact assessment you need to do to erect a base station, we're also trying to shorten that from 18 months to 90 days, and that will be a tremendous achievement, which I believe that we can do. We are going to be presenting to the state governors to basically let them understand that if the more hurdles you put in front of these infrastructure providers, whether it is in terms of multiple taxes, levies, and all of that, the less ability they have to roll out the infrastructure that you need for your people that live in your states and for you as a state government. Many of these state governments are rolling out their own e-government services. How do you do that when you don't have the infrastructure? So we're trying to make it a win-win situation where we can make it easier for us to roll out this infrastructure. That's on the one side. Now, after the fines were imposed and were paid, before they were paid, what NCC did was to agree with the operators. So there's no point, okay, you fine them this month. Next month, the quality of service isn't what it needs because you can't resolve any of these issues in 1 month. So you can't keep finding them 1.5 billion every month. By the end of the year, they'll all be out of business and we won't have any services. So what they did was they agreed a plan with the operators to say, okay, what do you need to do to get the quality of service up to where it needs to be? How do we support you? What are the things that we need to do? What are the investments that you need to make? And all the operators have submitted these plans to NCC, and that's what we're working with right now. And I think that collaborative win-win approach between a regulator and the industry is really the way that we're going to resolve this quality of service issues. And I think NCC has done a tremendous job in, first of all, the fine, which had to be done, but more importantly, because fining really is not going to solve the quality of service issue, more importantly, working collaboratively with the network operators to ensure that within the shortest possible time we have the quality of service that we deserve.
Now let's move away from all of the issues of communication technology. It's a little bit of a digression now. Well, of course, it's still relevant. I mean, you're a woman minister in this present administration. I just want to find out from you, what are your thoughts about having more women, in various positions of government and authority? I mean, do you really think this administration is doing enough on that issue?
Oh, I think they're doing a lot. Don't you
think we need to have more women representation?
Oh, absolutely. But it's a good start. Look, there are 13 of us in a cabinet of 40 something, and all of us are holding fairly important positions. The first female petroleum minister. Minister of Finance is female. If I use myself as an example, the pioneer minister for communication technology, which is really, it's a man's field. Engineering and all of that, is a woman. The DG of SEC is a woman. The Chief Justice of the Federation is a woman. So really, we're making a lot of progress. I think it's tremendous, and I really commend President Jonathan on really working to that agenda. Could there be more? Definitely. There needs to be more representation, not only in the executive but also in the legislature. Definitely needs to be more female representation. But I think we're making good progress as a country.
Now, looking at the country as it is, generally speaking, holistically, issues of security and all whatnot, what role do you think women have to play? Perhaps because we're talking development of communication technology, but obviously there can't be any development where there's so much crisis all over the place now. Doesn't that bother you, especially in the northern parts of the country?
On security, because without security, then there really cannot be any development. So if we look at the progress we've made, we could have made 2 or 3 times more progress if we had a country that was at peace and was secure and all of that. So that's been a very big disappointment and really a big setback, I think I should call it, for this administration. What can women do about it? I think it's not so much about women. I think it's what Nigerians can do about it. I think it's the Ministry of Women Affairs will always say there are many things that can be done, but I think this is such a serious issue, such a complex issue. I don't think I can really comment on what can be done right now. But there's no gainsaying that we need to resolve the security issue so that we can make progress as a country, and so that we have a much more united country that is working together to deliver on our national aspiration of being a top 20 economy by 2020.
Now, in your own opinion, do you think Nigeria, in a very short possible time, be able to compete with these industrialized countries? Because we definitely have to get there sooner rather than later. Your Vision 2020, I keep mentioning that because it's one of the thrusts or the aims of this present administration. Can we really compete with them within the shortest possible time? Provided we have all the necessary infrastructures.
Yeah, I mean, power being one major thing. But really and truly, and this is not because I'm Minister of Communication Technology, I strongly believe that ICT will be the way in which we can close the gap. They talk about the digital divide, between, less industrialized and the developed countries. And this digital divide is all about how we've leveraged technology. And I think technology is going to be one key way in which we can actually accelerate the closing of that gap. Imagine if we can improve the quality of education using technology. Imagine if we can improve the quality of healthcare using technology. Imagine if we can improve the productivity of our businesses, the productivity of our agriculture using technology. All of these things are possible. So I think that ICT just runs across everything, and if we're able to fund and build proper infrastructure, fund and deliver adequate services on this infrastructure, I think it'll be a really strategic way of trying to close that divide. We may never, we'll never be as, I shouldn't say never, and never say never, but it will take time. But I think ICT is going to be a major accelerator for closing that digital divide.
Looking at the sub-region, the West African sub-region, do you think Nigeria can also be a hub of communication technology?
Absolutely.
Considering our population.
Without a doubt. Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, I think that in terms of the size of our ICT market, it really is probably the biggest in the sub-region. I suspect that if we are successful in all of the initiatives and the policies that we're trying to put out there, will probably be just as successful as some of the other. You've got the Maghreb countries, Egypt, which probably a little bit ahead of us, but who are falling behind now because of all the issues that they have. But I see Nigeria can not only be a regional hub, but it can actually be a continental hub for ICTs. Very, very possible.
All right, one last thing, just wanted to find out, when you wake up in the morning and just before you go about the normal day, what readily comes to mind? I mean, how do you intend to go about the day's business? What are your expectations?
I think when I wake up in the morning, it's just it's praise to God for wisdom for the day that's basically unraveling. I think that's really the biggest thing for me, because there's so many things that are going on, and really and truly you need a lot of wisdom to handle the ministry, the policy, the politics, all of that. I think that for me is it, and just getting ready again to ensure that I deliver on those things that I promised Mr. President that I would deliver on, and that's what keeps me going.
We certainly wish you well in
thank you very much,
endeavors as the Minister for Communication and Technology. Mr. Omobola Johnson, we thank you for coming on Question Time. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Our guest surely has our job cut out for her, as many of us will expect, though you may say her position is quite challenging, being the first Minister of Communications Technology and coming from the private sector. But we believe she can achieve quite a lot, going by the number of initiatives that have been put in place to develop the information and communication technology sector, particularly the harmonization of ICT policies into a single broad-based policy that will certainly address all sections of the ICT sector. And our guest says that policy document is expected to be the bedrock of ICT development in the country. We certainly acknowledge the ministry's drive in facilitating an effective broadband network aimed at increasing broadband penetration within the country, and hope that it will serve the needs of millions of Nigerians wherever they are by the year 2015. That is when the broadband penetration is expected to hit 20% from the present 6%. And we also hope that whatever achievements that she makes now till the end of her tenure, it will serve as a litmus test for others that will be coming after her as a Minister for Information, or shall I say Communication Technology. Well, that's our package for this week. Don't forget that you can always send us your questions, comments and suggestions to questiontime@channelstv.com, or you can also watch us online at channelstv.com. Till we come your way again next week, I'm Ayatunde Balogun saying bye for now.